Okay.
A doctor.
Yes.
I'll take to storage.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me put out my business card.
Okay, right. Good evening. Let's go. So we were in the middle of no, we actually finished it, I think, the piece that we were doing, didn't we? Yeah. Chazaka. Right. Yeah, we're up to this I think we're up to towards the end of Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph. We need to recap because we'll need we need what we did for the next bit as well. So let's just go over that. So if you remember, it's Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, 5 lines down, and the last. So we'll go over the last piece because it's very relevant for the next bit. You have a scenario where nothing to do with Chazaka Gimel Shonim, 3 years. It's talking about this Chazaka is talking about methods of acquisition. The Gemora says in the Mishnah says in Kiddushin, you can acquire land in 3 ways: Kesef, Shtar, and Chazaka. You pay money, you sign a document, or you do some bit of work to the land, or something like that. This scenario is where one person, Ruvain, sells the land to Shimon and the trees to Levi. And the question is, what do they get? What do they each get for that purchase? That's the question. And that's in Machlokas between Rav Zvid and Rav Papa. So one of them does a chazaka on the land, one a chazaka on the trees. Again, it's a bit of a red herring, the chazaka bit, because that's not actually important. That's not so significant here. It means this one of them did the chazaka. They performed the method of kinyan, whatever it was, right? The way they did a bit of work to the land. That's how you acquire land. But the question is, the trees. Question is, what do they get? Zvid says, this one gets trees and this one gets land. It means to say, one of them buys the tree, gets the trees without any land, meaning when the trees die, that's it. You don't get to plant. You don't plant anything else, right? You don't plant anything else in place of the trees. And the other one gets all of the land. And the chiddush is, says the Rashbam, even if there are 3 trees there, and later on in Daf Pei Aleph or Aleph, we learn that if you buy 3 trees, it's assumed that you got the land with the trees, because that's what the significance of buying 3 trees, assuming they come with land. The land that's between them and the land that you needed to work the trees, etc., etc. Here is different. Why? Because here there are 2 buyers. There's someone who bought the land and someone who bought the trees. And therefore, the person who bought the land can say to the trees, the guy who bought the trees, right? 1 second, I didn't get any trees. So why should you get land? I bought land, you bought trees. And what does it mean you buy trees? You bought the trees. That means to say, trees die, you're finished. You don't own anything in the land. As soon as the trees die, you finished. The period of your acquisition has ended. Right? That's Zvid's view. Fair enough? Clear?
Yeah, so how did the guy that bought the trees, those trees get nourished from the land underneath?
No, that's assumed. That's not an assumed. That's why I think the Rashbam says, yeah, that's assumed. Again, there is another approach to this sugya in Tosfos, but the Rashbam's approach and the first approach in Tosfos also is that that's not up for debate. There's no question that he gets something. There's no question he gets the trees whilst they're busy producing fruits, whilst they're still alive. Either nourishing from the land. Okay, fine, but that's what I bought. I bought the trees. Obviously they're going to have to live. They're not living on thin air. So obviously that's fine. Yeah.
Didn't we talk about in the sugya about the wolves? Didn't we say that there was a minimum amount of land that goes with the tree?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Or the roots of the tree or something.
What do you mean?
So we had talked when we were talking about when you can build the wall.
The wall.
Yeah, when we can build the wall, we talked about where the roots of the tree go.
Right. Yeah, how much it nourishes and everything else. That's true. Okay. Yeah, but here is different because here you sold to 2 people, and therefore the person you sold the land to can object and say that I didn't get any trees and you got any land. That's it. Yeah, you're right. That's a critical point in the sense that, and we'll see that in the next sugya as well. There's a massive difference between one person selling to 2 different people land and trees, and where there's just 2 of us and I sell you trees. That's a different story. We'll come to that in the next sugya. So that's what Rav Zvid holds. Rav Papa said to him, he asked him a question. He says, if so, the owner of the trees gets nothing in the land. and therefore, the owner of the land should be able to say to the owner of the trees, I'll uproot your trees and get lost, basically. Now, the Rashbam learns, and the first pshat in Tosfos, that he can't literally tell him to go now. But it's not, the question of Papa is, it's not logical that as soon as the tree dies, you should have to leave. You know, it doesn't make sense. Why should you lose? Why should you have to do that? The way Tosfos says it is, since he sold him 3 trees, it's not logical that as soon as the trees die, he should be able to tell him to go to leave the land, you know, to uproot the tree and go. And therefore, that's why he doesn't. And that's why Rav Papa objects to, and Rav Papa says that he disagrees with Rav Tzvi. So therefore, yeah. Now, I mean, the second pshat in Tosfos is that Rav Papa's question is actually he's saying to him he should be able to go straight away. He should be able to say that to him straight away. In other words, basically, Tosfos' second pshat is the second mahalach in the sugya is that if it's true what you're saying, he says to us like this: if it's true what you're saying, that as soon as the trees die, you're finished and you've got to leave, right? And that is genuinely the case, that you own nothing in the land, then that means that he should be able to tell you to go now. Well, there's no logic to say because you can't, similar to, you know, you don't have anything, the trees can't grow either.
And then the purchase is the net cost, but there's no value to it at all.
It's the value of the tree. It's the value of the tree.
No, but if he's told that he can't stay, yes,
Because are we saying this is a simultaneous purchase? The owner of the land buys the land at the same time as the trees.
The owner of the land, yeah, the two of them buy together, it seems. Yeah, that would be different, I think. That would be different. Yeah, that would be different. Let's assume they buy together. But the point is like this: is it's admittedly a little bit difficult to understand and also the loshon of the Gemora. The language of the Gemora implies that a Papa's problem is that you should be able to tell him straight away to go away, right? It's not such a strange thing if you're allowed to, you know, if you learn that everyone agrees that you're allowed to stay as long as the trees are healthy, then it's not so strange. Okay, so I bought that right, and I have to leave afterwards. That's why Tosfos suggests a different approach, which is Rav Papa's real question, Rosvid, is that to take your approach, he says to Rosvid, to the logical conclusion, which is that the argument the owner of the land, the guy who bought the land, says to the owner of the trees, the argument he makes is, hold on a second, my land, I didn't get any trees, you didn't get any land. The logical conclusion of that is that you get nothing at all. And that means you've got to leave straight away because your trees are growing on land that's not yours. And that's Rav Papa's argument. And that, he says, can't be fair. And that can't be right because I bought trees. How can you? It's obviously wrong and manifestly unjust for me to buy trees and be told I have to chop them down straight away and that they're only useful for firewood. Clearly, that's unfair. And that's Rav Papa's problem. And therefore, Rav Papa says the only way we can understand why it is that the owner of the trees, the only thing we can understand, it's fair and logical to say to what the owner of the trees actually bought is, look at the Gemara, that there must be the person, one of them bought trees and half the land, and the other one bought the other half of the land. And that's the logical way of resolving it. And
it sounds like the land bought the land.
Yes. And again, the Rashbam here has two different ways of understanding this. Either it's lav dafka chatzi karka, half the land. It means whatever the trees need, between them and underneath them, and then whatever you need to work the tree, to work the land. Or he says it means dafka chatzi, and the scenario is where the trees are evenly spaced out in such a way, like we learned before, that actually the trees need all the land. That's the scenario, okay? Except for the fact that he sold it to someone else. And therefore, even if it was only 2 trees, where the halacha would be, we hold in later on in this Masechta, you don't get any land. Here you do, and because of a different svara. And the svara is that the owner of the trees can say to the owner of the karka, just like he sold to you, the owner of the guy who bought the land, right? But I in your face sold generously, and you got a lot of land or whatever, so too to me as well. And therefore half the land is mine. We'll see that in the next sugya. There's this concept of ayin yofa, ayin ro. When a person sells something, it's a big machlokus in Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanon, a number of times in this whole Masechta, about when you sell something to someone else, and it's not clear from the contract what exactly you sold. Now, normally the first place to look is the contract, but often they didn't have contracts in those days, and even nowadays you can have ambiguities in the contract, and it's not clear. And the question is, do we assume that a person selling something to someone else sells generously or stingily? Does he want to retain something more as much as he can for himself, or is he selling? Is he selling
The house with the contents or not?
that type of thing? That type of thing. The classic example we're going to see in the next sugya is as follows: I sell you a house, but it's clear that I didn't sell you the well, and that's assumed, and that everyone agrees to that, right? There's a well in the property, and the well is mine, and that seems to have been the norm in the times of the Gemora. It's clear Hamoches Abayis. I think it's the first Mishnah Hamoches Abayis. Somebody who sells a house does not sell the well. Why? Because I sold you a house, not a well, right? But the question is, when I sold you the house, did I retain access to my well? And that depends on whether I sold you the house by ayin ra or by ayin yofer. If you say that you sold by ayin yofer, that means you gave him everything, and therefore I have to buy an access route to my well. It's true that I keep the well, but I sold by ayin yofer. Do you understand? Which means I've sold every bit of land. I can't get to my well. Okay, so I have to buy it. I'll buy a route. What?
Got the wrong solicitor.
Yeah, exactly that. That's the whole point. In fact, when these shilas come up nowadays, they're less common. Debates over mechira are less common nowadays in Beis Din because there's much more documented. The first thing a Beis Din will say, well, what does it say in the contract? Usually these things nowadays are spelt out. Not always, but usually. Now, by ayin ra, if you sell by ayin ra, that means I did retain for myself a route to my well.
What's the determinant? Is it his previous history of?
No. That's interesting. No, it's we go with the man on the Clapham omnibus. You know about that phrase? That's the phrase used in English. That's the reasonable man test. The man on the Clapham omnibus. Basically, it means that you take the average Joe in the street, right?
Doesn't work
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, you take the average Joe and your average man in the street. No, that's seriously. That's the simple explanation. What is he generous when he sells or not? And that's the machlokas in the Akiva and the Rabbanon. I mean, I'm sure there's more to it than that, but basically, it's not person specific. It's not person specific. It's got to be a generalized approach to everyone, and the assumption as to what was specific, what was your intention. Anyway, so. Okay, so this is the point about Rav Papa and Rav Zvid. Now we're clear on Rav Papa and Rav Zvid. Rav Zvid says you get the trees, you get the land, and he sticks with that. And obviously he does. Obviously he says you keep the trees as long as they're growing, right? Rav Papa says no. Rav Papa says you must own land as well, and therefore you get half the land and I get half the land, or maybe I just get enough land I need for the trees. That's the two approaches in Rashbam. Fine. Next case, Pshita says the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom of the Yomud. It's obvious mocha kakav she'alonis lefonov if he sold land and he retained trees in front of him, yesh lo karka. He does keep land, does keep the land. Now here there's just Ruvain and Shimon. I'm Ruvain, for example, and I'm selling land to Shimon, but I'm keeping the trees for myself. So Gemara says it's obvious, yesh lo karka. It's obvious that I want to retain land for my trees. Vafilu Rabbi Akiva, the machlokas I just explained, even according to Rabbi Akiva, Doma, who says moicha ba'ayin yofer moicha, the person who sells, it's assumed he sells very generously, but ayin yofer, he sells generously, and therefore he gives everything away. Hanimili gabi bar v'dus. That's only with the scenario I explained before, with a well. A stus is a cistern, so a different, similar type of thing, right? Dus, yeah, bar v'dus. You're selling a well or a cistern. It's not a cistern like a little pot above the ground. It's a cistern where you go to Masad and you discover what a cistern is. There was like these huge things. What, above or below ground? What? No. I think yeah, it's a water system. It's a water system, so it can hold water. I think it's above ground. I think a bar is in the ground and a cistern is above ground. Yes. That's right. So a cistern, I think, was above ground. Basically, it's something to hold water, but I think it's built as opposed to like in the ground.
It's definitely built. They manufacture. Where's it manufactured?
Yes. Yeah. All cisterns, things like that.
You guys love it. You can walk into a shoot.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Rashbam says in Hamilchas Abayis, Barba Chafira Dus Binyan. It could be they were both underground, but one is just like a hole in the ground, you dig it, and the other one is actually it's a building. It's like you build it. Anyway, so even according to Bikiva, who says that if you sell ba'ayin yofer, that's when it comes to selling a well or a cistern, they don't weaken the ground, and therefore the assumption is that you sell everything, and that means I'm going to have to buy a route to my well because I sold the house to you, and therefore I sold everything to you. Avalilona, all the land. Avalilona is for when it comes to trees. Trees, this is what Martin said before. Trees damage the land. You didn't quite say it like this, but the roots, they weaken land by definition. Trees can be damaging to the land. Therefore, shiurei shaya. You definitely leave over what's it called? You leave over land around the trees. Why? Because if he doesn't leave over land, what's going to happen? You're setting yourself up for a disaster. Remember, Reuven is selling Shimon the land. If he sells everything apart from the trees, then what's going to happen? Lei molei, the guy he sold the land to is going to turn around to him and say, Vazil, uproot your trees, Shoko Vazil. Get rid of your trees because they're damaging my land. Right? So therefore, the Gemora says it is obvious. Right? This is Pshita. We're going to get onto the questionable case in a minute, but Pshita, it's obvious that if you sell land to someone else, retaining trees for yourself, it is obvious that you've also retained land for those trees. Because to not retain land for those trees means you are setting yourself up for failure. Because the guy's going to tell you to get rid of your trees. Okay, that's either Rashbam in this case. Third Rashbam. What?
Land without trees, they go together. The trees on the land.
Nope, I'm just selling the land. I'm keeping the trees.
It's the land.
You can own the land without owning the thing. It's on the land.
In the ground.
Yeah, you don't own the plants. You can do it. Yeah, Macha Kagav Shelon is the fun of 3 Rashbams from the end of the Amud. He sells the land and he left over the trees to himself. It's like Monopoly. Monopoly. First, you've got to buy the site, and then you can build houses, right? And hotels. No? Simple as that. Even if there are only 2, yesh lo karka. Even if he only has 2, right? Yesh lo karka. He gets land. As much land as the trees need to live. It's as much as they need. And even if they dry out, he's allowed to plant others in their place. Because definitely the seller, he's going to leave over land for himself. If I'm selling you my land, I'm retaining trees myself. Obviously, I'm retaining land. We say this explicitly in the 4th parak, Mochas Abayis. Amar Rav Huna Aval Gav Amar Rabban. And Rav Huna says, even though the Rabbanon say, Hakona Beisilonos, someone who buys 2 trees, B'Sur Shel Chaveiroi, in his friend's land, Hareza Loikona Karka. You don't buy land. Mocha Karka. If a person sells land, V'Shir Beisilonos Lefonov, and he leaves over 2 trees in front of himself, Yesh Lo Karka. It's obvious that he retains land. Do you understand the difference? You got to be clear about the difference, right? If I go to David and say, I want to buy trees. I would like to buy 2 trees. So the din is, I just bought the trees. If I buy 3, then there's an assumption I've bought some land as well. But 2 trees, I've just bought 2 trees. But if David owns the land and the trees, and he sells to me the land, right? So he's in the driving seat because he owns everything at the moment. So it's obvious he's keeping back for himself some land for his trees. Because otherwise, it's a crazy thing to do. Because I'm going to turn around afterwards and say, get rid of your trees. You with me? That's the That's the difference. And it says Rashbam, Rabbi Kiva. Plug to Rabbi Kiva Rabbanon Kamar Mochas Abayis. Machlokes Rabbi Kiva Rabbanon is later on in the 4th parak, Mochas Abayis. The Shnei Mekomos In two places, you have the machlokas appears in two places. When it comes to selling a house, it says in the Mishnah, Itzia is like a little outhouse building attached to the main house. And the din is that you sell the house, but not the Itzia, not the outhouse, or the little porch that was attached to the building. You didn't sell the well or the cistern, that's the assumption. Even if you wrote in the contract, interestingly, the depth and the height. So you wrote like, underneath, underground and above ground, it doesn't matter. Those things are not sold. It's just like a contractual thing, and it's set out by Chazal that there's an assumption if you sell a house, certain things are not included. Even if you write kuvaruma, the depth and so you're telling me, well, how can I sell them if I want to? So presumably you can explicitly say, I'm selling you the well, right? We can have such a deal, but there's an assumption these things are not included. But Rabbi Kiva goes even further. Rabbi Kiva says. Sorry, he doesn't go further. He says that you need to buy a route to your well. Although you retain the well, you have to buy a route to be able to access your well. Why? Because a person sells generously, and he leaves nothing over in his sale for himself. You don't have to buy yourself a route. Because a person who sells, he sells with an iron raw. That means to say he doesn't sell generously, he sells stingily. Okay, so that's the first example. That's the first time you see the machlokas as to whether you have to buy a route to the well that you retained, or it's assumed that you've got a route to your well. When you're selling a field, it says the same, also says in the Mishnah a similar thing. When we say the seller sells generously, and he does not retain for himself a route to go to his well. Doesn't retain that route. The same idea. Selling a field, the same thing applies. So Rashbam was just telling us this machlokas appears in two places. But the Gemora said that machlokas, even Rabbi Kiva who says that you've got to buy the land to get to your well, so you're retaining the well for yourself, selling the house, retaining the well. You've got to buy a route to the well because you sell generously. So I've sold everything. I've got to buy a route to my well, right? Yeah. That's only with a bar vadus. Who to come Rabbi Kiva to Rabbi Kiva derech la'atzmis was a bar klum. That's when Rabbi Kiva says that you don't retain a route for yourself around the well at all. That's because the well does not weaken the ground. The buyer can sow his crops right up to the lip of the well, no problem with that. So the buyer is not going to shout at him and say, "Oh, get rid of your well, it's damaging my land." It's not going to say that. Get rid of his well from here. It's not damaging him at all. Therefore, the seller, it doesn't cross his mind to retain for himself anything from the land. Therefore, he has to purchase from him a route to his well with money to get to his well, right? That's how it is. That's how it is, because the seller does not think about retaining a route to his well. You understand what's going on here? There's a question of whether you sell buying yofer, buying raw. Right? There's a question: do you sell generously or not? Rabbi Kiva says we assume you sell generously. You're selling. That's the assumption, right? That's what people normally do. They sell. If there's a debate, if there's a doubt, we assume you sold everything, right? That's the assumption, right? Everything that's rational and normal to be included. The problem is that only works if there isn't a specific counter reason to say, that you would not act in this way. So with a well, there's no reason why you would think to retain specifically, assume you retain a route to your well.
You need to get to the well.
Yeah, that's the problem. You do need to get to your well. You do need to walk to your well, right? Yeah, no, it's his own. It's a private one. Yeah.
You wouldn't sell something that restricts your access to your own well.
Yeah, that's where it's a bit tricky. Yeah.
Could be he didn't need it at first, but they decided he needed it.
It is a bit tricky because we're seeing Rashbam here has gone down the route of the complication of this Rashbam is he introduces the element of asik adaite. Asik adaite means crosses his mind. And he says it's not going to cross your mind because since the well is not damaging the other guy's property, there's no fundamental problem with having my well in your property, right? It sits there very nicely, doesn't bother anyone. It's keeps itself to itself, right? And therefore, there's no well.
The seller doesn't cross the seller's mind.
It doesn't cross the seller's mind to retain any land because the buyer is not going to tell you to remove your well. You have to make some distinction here between access is not enough of a reason to cross your mind. Yes?
Yes, but isn't that point that there's a fundamental difference between retaining ownership and access? So, for example, in English law or real estate, I can sell a whole site, retain access, retain rights, the gambler's rights.
By the way, we do that on Pesach, you know that.
So
we sell the chometz to the goy and the places the chometz are in, because you literally sell the physical. That's one of the ways you do the kinyonim. But I ask the goy if people need right of access.
Right of access.
We ask permission. It's a bit different. We just ask permission. He owns it entirely.
Real estate.
Yeah.
It means I have right of access.
Yeah.
So isn't there? Aren't we looking at this slightly wrong? In the sense, not wrong. In the sense of the discussion here is about retaining ownership of part of the land, a pathway to that well.
Yes.
So it's not that, and so because the machlokas then becomes, does he actually own that land? I.e., so he owns the land up to the well, and he decides he wants to pave it. Right?
Yes.
Now, actually, the guy comes along and says, "Hang on a minute, you can't pave this. This belongs to me." So I don't think there's a question here as to whether he retains the right of access. I think it's whether he retains any ownership, over part of the land to access the well.
No,
but it's
massive enough commitment.
No, but why do you think? The question I think is why would a person? Let's think of it like this. We're going to say, okay, let's just see let's very small. Let's see the rest of it, then we'll get to compare the other side, right? That's useful. We'll come back to David's point in a second. Top of the next omelet. Where we're saying is like this. We're saying that a person, Rabbi Kiva says, you have to buy a root to your well because it's not going to cross your mind that you need, etc. You need access, and therefore it's assumed you sold the land completely. However, if I retain trees and I sell you the land, then I'm definitely going to. It's assumed that I bought land with the trees, because if I just kept the trees, then you're going to tell me to get lost. Because the roots of the trees weaken the land, and they actually stop you plowing because there are roots there. Then it will definitely cross his mind to retain for himself land around the trees, so that the buyer can't cause him problems later. When his trees dry out, get rid of your trees. He can't do it till it dries out, same as before, right? But then you'll be able to say to him, uproot them because they are damaging my land. And Rashbam emphasizes again, he can't say anything now. But once the trees dry out, that's when he can say to him, go away, right? So you've got to look at the two and compare the two. We're saying that it wouldn't cross your mind to retain a root to your well, but it will cross your mind to retain land under your trees. Because if you retain no land under your trees, he's gonna cause you big problems. So how's that fit with what you're saying before?
Because a right of access doesn't necessarily incur any cost or damage, right? Or encroachment on the ownership.
Right.
So whereas trees or anything that is going to basically potentially, as you say, impact or reduce the value of the other person's property, you would naturally, as you say, think about it when you were making that sale or purchase.
Yes.
Because you know otherwise there's a possible claim against you.
Yes.
Whereas when I'm selling you this house, I'm not, as you say, I'm not selling you the well. Therefore access is implied. But ownership is not implied. Right? So because ownership means that I can tell, so for example, the 3 trees I bought, can I sell them to someone else?
You can.
Right, because they're mine. Yes. Right? And so also on top of that, as you say, and the earth beneath them has an impact. If it were to be owned by the other third party, my roots may be having an impact on that land. So facto, I'm buying that's implied I'm buying that land.
Right.
Whereas here, if I own a route to the well, I could sell the well and that strip of land. I could put up a fence and say this route belongs to me, right?
Right.
Yeah, but that's not what we're dealing with here. Yeah, right of access in inverted commas is a given, right? I didn't sell you the well, I only sold you the house, but I need to access my well. I can go, but I don't own the land.
No, you can't get access.
I can't physically go there.
No.
Right. So that's my problem.
Yeah.
So therefore, I don't believe. Yeah. If like one.
No, you can't. You don't have access. You don't have access. You don't have access. You have to buy it. You have to buy it. You have to buy access. You have to buy it.
Well, in which case, there's no way anyone would ever.
So.
I agree.
We never do it.
Mm.
No, because if we were saying if we're silent upon it, which way does it go? The answer is obvious. No one in their right mind, especially a well, which is effectively water, which is effectively income, money, resource. There's no way I would sell my access to that as part of selling you a house when I'm not selling you the well.
There must be. It's clearly the case. It's clearly the case that you sell everything. It's clearly the case that you sell everything. Because I mean it's just that's just how it is. If you look at the what? Retains the well, but not the route, not the access route. One second. You've got to buy it. You have to buy it. Second.
Why would you want to keep the well if you couldn't use it?
It's not that you. With it. What was that?
I've got no way of getting to my tree.
No, there has to be a difference between the difference has to be the way you look at the whole situation. We have to be, we assume if we say moicha ba'ayin yofen moicha, a person sells generously, that means that they sell everything. It's true that it's not that I don't sell the well. The well was never in the sale. It's not like the well is not an exclusion. The well is not an exclusion. I just never sold it. I sold you a house, not a well, right? There's no, therefore, reason to assume specifically that I have deliberately excluded from the sale. We'll go with the default. The default with the sale is I've sold everything. It means that I have to then purchase access. Okay, fine. So a separate deal. We'll make a separate deal, and that means you understand. You're looking at it like this. You're saying that you're saying that I'm selling a house and the well is excluded. Well, obviously I'm not going to do that because I have to get. How am I going to get to my well? It's not like that. I'm selling you a house. I'm selling you everything to do with a house, right? The well is not a house, so that's just irrelevant, right? It means I'm going to have to later on go and buy. That's a casualty of selling things, you know.
So just agree a deduction of the purchase price. Why wouldn't that be the same scenario?
Why would
to keep the right?
Well, you might do that. You might do that. You might deduct from the purchase price, but maybe you would. Maybe you would. But the point is, you don't have a separate contract. There's nothing. All you do is you sold the house, right? You sold the house. All you did, right? The halacha is you sold the house, not a well. So obviously I keep the well, right? It means I'm going to have to go later on and buy a route to my well. Okay, fine. That's a separate cheshbon, and we'll work that out another time. The difference here with the trees is that when I retain trees for myself, I'm selling you land, right? It's a flaw within the sale for me not to retain land, because you're definitely going to say to me, because my trees are damaging your land, right? They're obstructing you, unlike the well, which is sitting there quietly, not doing any harm. Because my trees are obstructing you in the usage of your land, it's obvious that I'm going to build into that sale a retention of land for myself. It's not the same as the well. Yes, you're saying I can't get to the well, but that doesn't interfere with the sale. Like the land is happy, the house is happy, the well isn't interfering with the house. So everything. So I'm not going to go through that whole motion. We go with the default. You sold everything. You're going to have to buy access rights. Okay, fine. So that's something different. But you don't think about that when you're selling. Whereas if I'm retaining trees, it is absolutely clear that I'm thinking about that. And also, I'll tell you something else. If you look carefully at the Rashbam says at the top of the Omid, the Olshan he uses is Vadai Asik Adaite. Now, why is that word Vadai there? He definitely thinks about this. I think Rashbam means that word is very important. The point is like this: since Rabbi Akiva says the burden of proof to prove the opposite of that is on the seller. Since we hold, Rabbi Akiva says, but no. Since Rabbi Akiva says, if any sofek, you assume it's with the lokech gets it. And it has to be 100% that you would definitely retain it. And that's the difference between the well and the trees. When it comes to the trees, he's definitely thinking about the fact that I've got to have land for my trees. Otherwise, you're going to tell me to get rid of my trees. So there's a high bar to go against Mocha Bayin Yofer Mocha. That's what I'm trying to say. There's a high bar because Mocha Bayin Yofer Mocha, people sell generously. Therefore, the assumption is any sofek, it's the buyers, right? Any sofek, let's assume it's the buyers, not the sellers, right? And there's a high bar. It's got to be 100% that you're going to retain this for yourself. That bar is only reached with the trees. It's not reached with the well. I can't get to my well. So what? Okay, you can't get to your well. That's a different cheshbon. There's no reason to think that crossed your mind because you were selling a house, not a well.
Are you assuming the sale of generous?
Yeah, also because there are other scenarios in the well when there is only one scenario with trees. What I mean is
maybe you're not interested in the well. That's right.
Maybe
That's right.
You've got an adjacent piece of land you can access that way. There could be other scenarios. Whereas in every single scenario, these trees are on that land and have been.
Yeah, exactly. And also think about the what's defined in the sale.
Yeah.
So you got to think of it like this. If I'm selling a huge plot of land, I could be selling a massive mansion estate, and there happens to be a well on that piece of land. Maybe I didn't even think about it. Maybe I forgot about the fact that it was a well. It's just not included in the sale. But in the second case, I am mocha ilonos, mocha karka, b'shir ilonos ilonos. That's the sale. The sale is I'm selling you land, but not the trees. That's all specified in the contract and it's set out. So clearly, I'm retaining land for my trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't we discuss the predication of the sale is based on whether or not the sales are generous or stingy, and therefore, if it's stingy, therefore you're not going to include. It's not going to be presumed that everything's included, and therefore, but if it's generous, then it is, and therefore,
yes,
surely the precipice is based on whether the beginning of the sale was in fact generous or stingy. What did I say?
It's okay.
I knew on it. Yeah.
First was the mountain. You go on, yeah.
Yeah, well, the point was.
Yeah, go on.
The point was that isn't the sale going to be, if you're going to say the foundation of a sale is based on whether it's generous or whether it's stingy,
right?
That will therefore decide whether or not you are being magnanimous in your sale.
That's true, but there's something we can go against that. That's true. The starting point is Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanon is the mocha selling ba'ayin yofa ba'ayin ro. That's true. But what we're saying is that you can have situations which is so strong that they counteract and they cancel out the assumption of Ein Yofer. And one of those examples is a case where you sell land and retain trees, even though according to the principles of Mocha Ein Yofer Mocha, you should sell everything. Here it's assumed you retain land for yourself.
Ein Yofer or Ein Ra, envelope.
No, that's the point. It goes against that.
Is that a principle or is that a
It's an exception. It's an exception. It's an exception to the concept of Ein Yofer here.
So
Right?
you're saying that the trees are damaging the land.
Yes. That's why you retain land under your trees.
Why would you do that?
Because otherwise he's going to tell you to get lost. You sold land to someone and you retain trees.
Yeah.
If you don't keep a bit of the land under the trees,
Yeah.
the person you sold the land to is going to tell you to get rid of your trees when they die.
Oh, and when they die, they're going to rot. So
They're going to go. You're not going to get anything else in the land. And obviously, I want.
The land is going to be worth less.
No, I'm going to retain for myself land under my trees so that I can make sure that I can continue working this land. And I can use what I need for the trees. And when they die, I can replant new ones. Let's assume that's what I'll
So
do.
he's selling them separately then.
He's not selling separately. He's selling land, but he's keeping land back for himself where the trees are.
So when they die,
Yes, he can replant. Yeah, exactly. He can replant.
I know issue when
Yeah. Now, now the Gemora carries on and says like this. So that was all obvious. But that's what I said. Pshita, the Gemara says that was obvious, right? However, Mochar Elonot, Bashir Kakadafonov. Now, this is where you sell the trees. So the first case was you sold the land and kept the trees. But if you sell the trees, Bashir Kakadafonov, and you kept the land back, it's the opposite, right? I have land and trees. I sell you trees and I keep back land. On that, look to the Rabbi Akiva v'Rabbanon. That's a machlokes between the Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanon. Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Akiva, the Amr says, the seller sells generously. Islay, he gets land, right? He gets the land. He gets land with the trees. The Rabbanon Lesley, according to the Rabbanon, he doesn't get, right? You with me? Now the Gemara spells this out now within and inside the Machlokes Rav Papa and Rav Zvit. Rabbi Akiva is according to Rabbi Akiva, he gets land with his trees. Va'afilu the Rav Zvit da'ama ein loi. What did we say on the previous Amud? Rav Zvit says when you have two buyers, someone buying land and someone buying trees. Yes, the halacha was what? The person who bought the trees, did he get any land? Nothing. One says, even Rav Zvit who says with two purchases, you don't get any land at all with your trees, even though you're buying trees. That's only when there's two purchases, one buying land, one buying trees. Because he can say to him, because one buyer can say to the other buyer, I didn't get any of your trees, so you get no ownership of land. But here, where there's only one person buying trees, it's assumed that you sold him a bit of land with the trees for what he needs. And similarly, Rabbanon fit even Rav Papa. The Rabbanon Leslie, and according to Rabbanon, he doesn't get anything at all, no land, because Mocha ba'ain raw Mocha, so he just sold the trees, no land. And even according to Rav Papa, on the previous Omid, who said what? With two purchases. What did Rav Papa say? You do get land with your trees. That's only when there's two buyers. Because the person who bought the trees can say to the person who bought the land, just like he sold generously to you, he sold generously to me too. Why should I lose out? It's assumed therefore that I got land with the trees. But over here, where there's only one buyer, we go with the default position, which is, according to the Rabbanon, who disagree with Rabbi Akiva, you sell stingily, which means if I sell you just trees, all you get is the trees. So all we've done, that's why we had to see that Gemara, because it's all the answer. What we've done is we've said that the Machlokes Rav Papa and Rav Zvit, just to summarize it, we'll see the Rashbam, very simply, the Machlokes Rav Papa and Rav Zvit was very unique and specific to two buyers. Each of their views only worked. They work because there are two buyers. There's a unique set of circumstances. Because there's two buyers, they're playing itself off each other. And that's why the rules are different as to whether you get land with the trees or not. Whereas when it's a straightforward thing, well, I own land and trees and I sell you trees, we go with the default principles of buying your to see whether or not you get land. Yeah. Yeah. What I'm saying, I have to see the Rashban because I can't leave in the middle. Forgive me. Let's see the Rashban first. Mochel, what? Mochel on us. I'll see if you answer the questions after the Rashban. Mochel on us. Yeah, you see it. It's the first narrow line. If a person sells trees and he leaves over land in front of him, Shapirish Lokain, he says explicitly, it's clear. He says, I'm selling you trees and not land. I'm keeping the land for myself. That's a machlokas between the Kiva and the Rabbanon. Bein Rav Zvid, Bein Rav Papa. Whether according to Rav Zvid or Rav Papa, they each fit into both opinions. That's what the Gemora spells out, right? Right? Very important line in the Rashbam. We're talking about two trees. Well, you're buying two trees. If you buy three trees, everyone agrees you get land. That's the rule. It's a mission and the Gemara that fits in according to Rabbi Kiva. If you buy three trees, you get land. The ratio which says that two trees you don't get land, love Rabbi Kiva. That's not according to Rabbi Kiva. As is clear according to in the Mishnah of Meiches Abayis, okay, that's explained over there how that fits in, because clearly here Rabbi Kiva says you do get land even with two trees, right? So that which says the one says you don't with two trees is not going to be Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva according to Rabbi Kiva says that a seller sells ba'ayin yofer generously islay. The buyer gets the place of the trees on the ground, to plant others in their place, when they die. Right? Yeah, you get to, that's what we're talking about. Again, Rashbam is consistent the whole way through. The question is never about these trees. Clearly, these trees, you can keep them as long as they live. The question is, are you able to plant new ones when they die? That's the question, right? The Rabbanon ain't lo karka. According to Rabbanon, the Rabbanon say he doesn't get land. The Milmusan, if they die, lo yitzacher b'mkoimon. You can't plant others in their place. Kedistan stoma, as it says, the Stam Mishnah there, you buy two trees, you don't acquire land. And then the Gemara spells it out, whether according to Rav Zvid or Rav Papa, Rav Zvid can also go according to Rabbi Kiva. The Gemara wants to achieve with this the point that both Rav Zvid and Rav Papa can go according to Rabbi Kiva and the Rabbanon. Otherwise, you're going to end up saying that Rav Zvid, yes, can only go like the Rabbanon. What does Rav Zvid say? You don't get land. Oh, well, second Rabbi Kiva says you do. So we're saying no. Here Rabbi Zvid will agree. Here Rav Zvid will agree. And it's not, he doesn't have to fundamentally disagree with Rabbi Kiva. Yes? But Hanim, because he says Hanim to come to Rav Zvid no karka, because when the Rav Zvid say you don't get land, Hanim, that's only got to be based on kuchos, that's only when you have two buyers. And he says to him, just like Leslie Be'elonos, Lo Beitz and Lo Peres, the owner of the land says, the one who bought the land, I didn't get anything in the trees, I didn't get the wood, I didn't get the fruit, I didn't get anything in the trees. So you as well, you didn't even get the place of the tree. When it dries up, go, you got to uproot it and go. However, and the Gemora says, and then the other way around as well, the Rabbanon can fit. Even according to Rav Papa, ostensibly, you would say that Rav Papa is not like the Rabbanon. The Rav Papa is like Rabbi Akiva. Why? Because Rav Papa says you get land with your trees, and Rabbi Akiva says you don't. The Gemara says no, because Rav Papa only says that you get land with your trees when there are two buyers. Hani mili the yeshlo karka, says the Rashbam. When is it that you get land? Gabi shneilu kuchos, when there are two buyers, two purchasers. The Omer Balu Elonos the Bala Karka, because the owner of the trees can say to the owner of the land. Just like that to you he's selling generously. What he's selling to you from the land, on condition that the land should be yours forever. It and its fruit, it's all going to be yours, right? So too, so to me as well, he's selling generously, right? He's selling generously. I should be able to consume the fruit of my trees forever. Shimyon Musu, to the extent that if they die, I'll plant others in their place. This is the svara. This line is the svara. A person doesn't sin unless he gets a personal benefit. So the logic here is, why would he sell to one generously and one stingily? Send one ayin yofa, one ayin ra. You understand? I'm selling to two people. This one I'm selling trees to, in Rav Papa's case, and this one I'm selling land to. The argument the owner of the trees makes as to why he should be entitled to land is, why on earth would the seller who sold to both of us be more generous to you than to me? Why should you get all the land and me, as soon as my trees die, I have to leave? It doesn't make sense. You don't sin, you don't do something wrong unless you're going to get a benefit out of it. I'm losing all my land anyway, I'm selling everything anyway, so it's logical that we're each going to be a fair split here. But that argument only works with two buyers. But over here, right, where he's retaining land for himself, what is he doing here? He's just selling trees. On that, the Rabbanan says, anything with him regards to himself, he sells in a stingy manner in order to retain for himself the maximum. And that's why Rav Papa can fit according to the Rabbanon. Even though with two buyers, Rav Papa says the person who bought the trees gets the land. That's because they can play each other off against each other effectively and say, look, he's so generous to you, he's going to be generous to me as well. I therefore get some land like you. But if, let's say, I own trees and land, and I'm selling you, what am I selling you? Just trees, okay, trees. There's a logic, says the Rabbanon, I sell the minimum. I want to keep back the maximum I can, retain for myself. And that's how it is. And therefore that's how we say the Machlokas Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanon can fit according to Rosvit or Rav Papa. Is that clear? Yeah, and again, the benefit is, why do we care? Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanon are Tanoim, and Rosvit and Rav Papa are Meroim. So why do we have to fit them in? The answer is we don't. It's for Rosvit and Rav Papa. We don't want to have to pigeonhole. We don't want to have to pigeonhole either Rosvit or Rav Papa into following specifically either Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanon in this major machlokas of Ayin Ra, Ayin Moch, Ayin Yofa, Ayin Ra, Ayin Yofa. You understand? That's what we're achieving. We don't.
Why?
We don't want to.
You don't tie ourselves down.
We don't want to tie down these Amiroim that they have to follow, right? Either Rabbi Akiva or the Rabbanon. One of the reasons might be because that has major consequences. There's lots of parokim where Rabbi Akiva and Rabbanon is a big enough commitment with their machlokas, Ayin Ra, Ayin Yofa. We don't want to tie in Rav Papa or Rosvit to one of the two. We want to.
So therefore, how do we achieve that contract? How do we achieve
By simply saying there's nothing to do with it. There were two buyers there, and there's only one here. Yeah.
Specify the contract. Now,
What?
You're saying that Ayin Ra doesn't envelope.
There's nothing in the contract. Forget contracts. No contracts. Assume no contracts. Ayin Yofa, Ayin Ra is not in a contract. It's a svara in a person's head. We assume people generally sell in a generous manner or a stingy manner. That's it.
If you have stipulations within the contract.
Well, why don't come onto contracts? Don't come onto contracts. Obviously, if a contract says I'm selling you X, Y, Z, obviously we'll follow the contract. Where there's no contract.
And there's no contract.
Or it's not, or this is not clear in the contract. This is not clear in the, there might be a contract, but this is not clear. This is not clear. Obviously, if you sell, you can sell what you like in a contract. I can specify to you, I'm being massively generous and I'm selling you all sorts of things that are not normally sold, or the other way around. That's fine. Right? The whole purpose of the machlokas is where it's not clear. Yeah, that's the machlokas.
Specifying Ayin Yofa or Ayin Ra, what that means. It's just a condition, if you will.
Which means it's not written down, yes? Yeah, it's a question of how you sell. When a person normally sells, are they generous or are they stingy in their sale, in their way they sell? It's market practices, it's common practice. It happens all the time. Someone's telling me in any legal system, you're going to have this question, right? It didn't quite say this. Did you mean that or not? Right. So you have to work what people normally mean, yeah?
If you say the two buyers have to have one buyer.
No, because if it's two buyers, then there's a different sorrow. Because then they're playing each other off. They're playing off each other. Because one of them can say, one of them can say to the other one, you're being, because you sold to me in a generous way, so you're selling to him in a generous way as well. They're both being sold. Yes, it's a different case. Torah Mr. Namar, the night face the months going to Torah. I did. Kaddish Rabban.